this is a party that has long been against big government. They wanted to shrink government and reduce taxes, and they have a lot of members are more focused on getting on TV, on Fox News or other channels instead of doing legislation. And so the adults in the room are far and few between them right now.
Republican Party infighting has already ousted their nominee for the role of Speaker of the House. Steve Scalise narrowly became the Republican nominee for Speaker on Wednesday, but he threw in the towel when more than a dozen of his colleagues publicly refused to back him. Here he is making the announcement in the House of Representatives.
I just share with my colleagues that I'm withdrawing my name as a candidate for the Speaker designee. If you look at over the last few weeks, if you look at where our conference is, there's still work to be done. Our conference still has to come together and is not there. There are still some people that have their own agendas.
Well, the race comes after the previous Speaker, who is also a Republican, Kevin McCarthy, was ousted for working with Democrats on a bipartisan budget that would keep the federal government open. I'm joined now by Daniel Lippman, who's a reporter at Politico covering the White House. And Daniel, this seems like a bit of a mess, isn't it? We're 10 days on and we still don't have a permanent Speaker.
It's pretty wild because usually what Republicans do is they elevate whoever is next in line or the next victim. And so Scalise had that position, and he is staying as majority leader, so he's not going to lose that job. But was not able to get a big part of the caucus, the conference, and he had the no votes and the withheld votes kept going up. And then it became a momentum game where everyone else was like, well, I want to speak out and get a more moderate speaker or get a more conservative speaker. And so it's a total cluster here in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, explain to me, though, why, if you were part of the Republican group that ousted Kevin McCarthy for trying to strike a bipartisan bill with the Democrats to keep the lights on, why you would back anyone right now, because if you don't back them, because there's not a permanent speaker, no bill that involves finance can be passed. So the federal government has to kind of mothball itself for a bit.
Well, there was only 8 or so Republicans who voted to oust McCarthy, and so they were backed up by all the Democrats who actually want to keep the lights on in government. And so basically, no one is can satisfy them, and I think they're going to have to find some compromise candidate who checks all the boxes and is not polarizing. Some people who were Kevin McCarthy allies thought that Scalise was not loyal enough to McCarthy. And then maybe McCarthy has said, well, he has said it's opened up to the conference. And so he could potentially go back in, although that's very unlikely. And so I think we're probably going to see a dark horse candidate. I don't think Jim Jordan, who was the runner-up to Scalise in that internal speakership contest, I don't think he has a great chance either because people were not happy with his participation in the House conference yesterday, where he was seen as rude, and he is so conservative that it's hard for him to raise money among more moderate donors.
Yeah, I mean, I did find it quite interesting actually that when Jim Jordan lost, he said he would back Steve Scalise, but when Steve Scalise pulled out and was asked, would you counterback Jim Jordan now, he absolutely avoided that question like the plague and wasn't prepared to say that. But I guess the question is, what does the Republican caucus want? Because as far as I could tell, Steve Scalise was almost kind of like the boring choice. He'd been a loyal foot soldier for a long time. He'd worked his way up through the House, was pretty well respected on the whole, and he was a rainmaker. He could bring the funds in. He could help fundraise.
It's quite shocking that someone who has all those credentials would not be able to get enough votes to be speaker, because this is someone who's raised more than $150 million, I think, in political donations throughout his entire career. He's traveled the country helping members get reelected and raise money. And so he had a lot of chips. And so whoever comes out of the speakership race, who's more of a backbencher, he is not going to have almost any of that. And so Republicans are going to be deprived of someone who can really raise a good amount of cash and has lots of wealthy donors. if they're going to pick a no-name congressman that no one in Washington or no one outside Washington has heard of.
Yeah, so I mean, what's the maths here? I mean, is it possible that the Democrats put up a potential speaker and a couple of Republicans cross the floor just to have the House working again? Or is that never going
I
to
think
happen?
that's more, they would have to get through every nominee or every Republican member before they do that. That is kind of far-fetched and more in the
That's
West Wing.
post-apocalyptic zombie type territory, is it?
Yeah, it's well, they could always pick Donald Trump, but he doesn't want to do it, and I think he has enough on his plate, keeping himself out of jail and
Mm. I
securing
mean,
his nomination. And
is the
so
Republican Party just ungovernable, even though it's doing quite well in the polls right now?
it's looking like that. This is a party that has long been against big government. They wanted to shrink government and reduce taxes, and they have a lot of members are more focused on getting on TV, on Fox News or other channels instead of doing legislation. And so the adults in the room are far and few between them right now.
Okay, well, look, thanks very much for giving us that rather depressing update there from Washington, D.C. Daniel Lippman, who is a reporter at Politico.